going to start by showing you the real me pictures, and this will tie back to my love for the Arctic, or subarctic in my case, interior Alaska. This is my family at Galena a few years ago on the Yukon River, where I spend as much time as I can. And when you know my history, I grew up in rural Alaska. I was fortunate enough to attend some great universities and get 3 degrees, and then, as I say, get close to home. I've been living in Anchorage for 17 years, which is almost Alaska. I always say it's 30 minutes from Alaska in any direction. So this is the real me too, and for those who do know me, there are a few in the room. They also know I have a twin brother. He's in the middle of that picture there with me. Your job is to figure out which one of the two there is standing in front of you and which one's not, along with the rest of my family. And my 10-year-old son's first bull moose, which he shot by himself out in the woods by himself. I was a couple miles away and started running when I heard that 243 shooting, which those of you familiar with rifles, you can tell the difference between a 243 and a 300 or something real. And it takes about 6 shots to kill a bull moose with a 243. So that was an exciting day for us there in, this is near Minto, Alaska, actually. So here's the one map. You're not meant to be able to read all those little words. In fact, I need to get glasses, I admit that. I can't even read them from where I'm standing here. But this is the Doyon region. Doyon was created by Congress in 1971 Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act. I know you've heard from several of my colleagues this year and in prior years, but you haven't heard from anyone from Doyon yet, and this is our region. So the black outline is the definition of our region. The orange splotches are our lands. This is the middle of the state, you can see, so we're headquartered in Fairbanks. The outlined area is the size of the country of France, a little over 110 million acres within that black outline. Our lands are 12.5 million acres. They're bigger than Vermont and New Hampshire combined, owned by an Alaska Native corporation. So that's the scale of what we're talking about in Alaska, and amazingly, when you exclude Fairbanks, there are fewer than 20,000 people living in that part of our world, which we care very much about. The first boat picture was Galena, which is right here. The second boat picture, the hunting trip, is right there. And I'm really glad we can't zoom in because I'm not sharing exactly where that hunting took place. I try to go back there every year. Third thing, I've got a couple more pictures. One of them is from where I grew up in Tok, which is a road community on the Alaska Highway. It was originally a construction camp. In our region, we have resources that are world class. But we only have 2 mines, none of them are on Doyon lands. We have no oil and gas production in our region, and the brown colored, oops, I'll go back here. These are sedimentary basins with high potential for oil and gas. They're extremely large, millions of acres in a couple cases. And this one, the Yukon Flats, well-known sedimentary basin, USGS estimates 1 to 3 alpine-sized fields, which produces 25,000 to 50,000 barrels a day over time on the North Slope. 1 to 3 of those probably in this area, not a single exploration well. We have done a little bit of work ourselves in that area. So the couple things I wanted to talk about today while you look at my Alaska. So this is taken from the banks of the Tanana River at Tanacross, about 10 miles from where I grew up. That's really my home country. The thing about ANCSA and the Arctic is there's so much promise, and you've heard about it here at this conference. You'll continue to hear about it in resource development and otherwise. And I think there are a couple things I'd like you to focus on, and I'm sure you've heard before. Indigenous people and ANCSA corporations in particular in Alaska are an important part of that story. And we were an experiment that Congress tried in 1971, and it's turned out very well. The thing that separates us from other corporations is our commitment to where we're from. We have a bias in favor of investing in Alaska. We're certainly not afraid of Alaska. And we have a large presence in the business community and in the policy community in Alaska, in Washington, D.C., and now internationally in the last few years. I'd encourage policymakers, whether they're corporate or government or interested individuals, to help take the next steps in the next 10 years, 20 years, 50 years. One of the things I really like is the theme of this conference, Shifting North and New Era in the Arctic, as I think most of the policy that's been applied to Alaska, and it's probably true of many of the Arctic nations, have been made in the recent history, focused on the larger aspects of our countries, which makes sense. We have less than 1 million people in the United States, far less than 1% of the population, and so trade policy, for example, is made with countries based on the vast majority of people living far from the Arctic, and it applies to us. And I'm going to skip forward. This is one other picture of Alaska. I'm going to come back to it. I'm going to show you one picture that's not from Alaska. This is our drill rig. We're an oil and gas contracting company at our heart in our business side. That's our newest rig, Rig 142. That picture was taken in Nisku, Alberta, which is where the Edmonton Airport is in Alberta. All of our rigs, save one, have been built in Nisku. That was a $125 million project, trade with Canada. And it's amazing to me how hard doing business across the Yukon border is. Our company has written a detailed memo to the U.S. Department of Commerce about how hard it is to do business with Canada. A second largest business we own is a privatized utility. Our partner is Canadian. It's a great business. It's very hard to do business over the Canadian border, and it's particularly hard to do business with the Yukon, which is our bordering territory in Canada. We care very much. We have a lot of shareholders from our corporation of Doyon who actually live in the Yukon because if you go back to the map a couple slides ago, our eastern border of our region is the Yukon border. We have hundreds of shareholders that live in the Yukon because our Athabascan groups, of course, didn't know what that boundary was just a few years ago. And we have many Gwich'in, Han, and Upper Tanana Athabascans who have relatives or grew up or travel across that border frequently, and we do almost no business across that border. We have more frequent airline connections to Iceland from Anchorage than we do to Whitehorse. There are more roads in one county in Washington State connecting to British Columbia than there are on the entire Alaska border with both British Columbia and Alaska. Those are the types of challenges we have, and as Arctic nations, I think we need to focus on our ability to connect people and businesses, especially in the case of the friendly relations we have with so many Arctic nations in the United States. There are plenty of opportunities to develop those world-class resources we have and the world-class people we have in our nations if we would only focus on the Arctic part in the next few years. And I know that work started, the work of the Arctic Council. There's a big meeting just over a month as the U.S. hands off the chairmanship in Fairbanks to the Finns. I'll be there welcoming hopefully some of you to our great interior Alaska in a month. And as we all continue the work in the Arctic, I would encourage everyone to focus on how we do take those next steps and shift our focus north for the new era in the Arctic. And I want to thank you for the opportunity to talk to you here today.